Here we go. So what I'm going to talk about is just epistemology. I'm not here to dig deep. What I wanted to do, and Jim and I talked about this, was sort of lay out at the very beginning or near the beginning of our inquiry today is what is the high watermark, so to speak, for how it is that we know. The truth of the matter is what I'm going to talk about here is that if anybody here is a professor of philosophy or has been reading philosophy for a number of years knows there's years of thought and research that can go in behind some of the ideas that I'm going to give glossing, passing mention of in this talk. So by all means ask questions and don't think I'm the one who has all the answers. Simply put though, what I want to do is just sort of lay out that groundwork of what are some of the ways that we can know things, what are some of the ways that work, some of them work not so well, and then let's just sort of beat that up a little bit. So some of the boats that I want to float today simply are one, ignorance, the second is disbelief, and then of course implicit and explicit disbelief, and that delves into the definition for skepticism, and I'll talk about that as well. And then I wanted some more ways of knowing. I'm just going to highlight the top and give you definitions for these. First of all, intuition is one way that we can know things. Authority, tenacious beliefs that exist in our society is another way that we can know things. Faith, rationalism, and empiricism. And then I'm going to leave it up to you, like Arthur did, to just simply decide for yourselves what you think is a better way to know something. But I'm also going to encourage you along the way to perhaps grasp onto some of I think, the better ways of knowing things. I don't mean to keep referring to Art, but I think that we touched on, and I think Em is going to come close to this too, we touched on topics that are very close to each other. What we know in the world, or the things that we truly have empirical evidence for, is pretty small compared to the truths that exist in the world, and certainly to some of the beliefs that are out there. I can't even imagine some of the deepest beliefs of some of the world's religions. There's so many religions, there's so many different ways of looking at the world and understanding it. And what I find is that this is of course a Venn diagram, and there is an intersection with tape on it that sort of brings us to a place where we have what is today human knowledge. What I want to talk about is how we get there into that place of human knowledge. So before I go much further in that, implicit, there it is. It's implied, though not directly expressed. It's inherent in the nature of something. I'm explicitly here right now, right? Where if I were kind of vaguely here, I'd be implicitly here. No, okay. I could be here in thought. It's a implicit disbelief is a disbelief that's not clearly defined or perhaps not clearly enough thought through. And so, you know, what somebody told, if somebody told you perhaps that I arrived here by spaceship, you know, on its face, you know, I have face value down there. You'd go, yeah, right, Jeff, you arrived by spaceship. But let's talk about that for a second. Would you need to do much of a skeptical analysis to disprove my statement that I arrived here by spaceship? Maybe I did, right? So, is it possible to disprove that statement? Let's talk about that, friend. What do you think?
I think it doesn't matter. You're making a claim. You come up with the evidence.
Well said. Okay. Anybody else?
His answer was better.
I'm going to go back to that, though. Is it possible to disprove? And therein, in that question, first of all, I agree with you, Grant. You know, I'm making the claim. The onus is on me to substantiate it. But the truth of it is, there's a lot of argument that goes into the making of your belief, whether or not it's even possible to prove or disprove that I came here in a spaceship. And if you think for a second, you'll remember, I don't know if you remember Carl Sagan, where he talks about the dragon in the garage.
Yes.
Right? Now Carl Sagan, there's one of Carl Sagan's friends makes the claim that he's got an invisible dragon hidden in his garage. And Carl Sagan goes over there and he basically says, I'm going to paraphrase this because it's not really meant to be a part of what I was talking about today, but you'll get the idea. He simply makes the point that maybe I could throw some flour on the floor, a little bit of flour, and we'll see the dragon's footprints. And oh, no, the dragon floats in there. He says, maybe we could try this or try that. And for every argument that Carl Sagan came up with, the fellow had another reason why that argument wouldn't work. And so in some cases, some statements fail on their face value. We recognize that. But one thing I want to point out is face value has a lot to do with common sense. And we know better than to trust it, right? So face value can have a lot of merit, when somebody makes an outrageous claim. But there still needs to be somebody who sits back and does the homework about whether or not we really can argue. What would be the skeptical analysis method that we would use to prove or disprove the claim that I have a dragon in my garage or that I have arrived here by spaceship? Somebody needs to do the math on that. And that's sort of the point. So an explicit disbelief, if I could put it that way, explicit means precisely and clearly expressed or readily observable. Explicit disbelief is a disbelief that can be clearly expressed, and the reasons for disbelieving have been clearly defined, which we never got to. We just didn't get there with my spaceship claim, right? I also happen to think there's a teapot going around the moon, but that's a different story altogether. So scientific skepticism or rational skepticism, and I stole this from Wikipedia because they pretty much hit the mark on this one. And sometimes it's referred to as skeptical inquiry. It's a practical epistemological position in which one questions the veracity of claims lacking empirical evidence. And notice they talk about the fact that it's lacking empirical evidence. In practice, the term is most commonly applied to the examination of claims and theories which appear to be beyond mainstream science. So if I were in the halls of academia right now, perhaps trying to prove or disprove a position, a certain part of the theory of evolution, a small amount about perhaps whether or not we really do have Neanderthal DNA in our bodies, that would not be seen as skepticism per se. That would be seen as Jeff doing research and applying the scientific method. Yes, skepticism is a part of that, but when we talk about skepticism or scientific or rational skepticism, we're talking mostly about claims which lack empirical evidence, and that's really where you'll find a lot of the conversation that happens here today. So that's fine. We can still talk about evolution and those other things, but contemporary skepticism is loosely used to denote any questioning attitude or some degree of doubt regarding claims that are elsewhere taken for granted. And I think you need to have somebody in society has to be the skeptic. A society needs that, and that's my opinion. You have a choice, though, and are you going to be implicitly skeptical or explicitly skeptical about any particular subject? And I think that you'll find as you look around the room, you know, perhaps you're skeptical about spaceships, and you're skeptical about religion. I don't know. But the idea is you're going to find your niche in the skeptical society, and it's important that you find it well. Enjoy it. We don't all have to know every argument for everything that there is out there, but we can certainly do what Jem said and enjoy the journey. We can certainly enjoy figuring things out. I highly recommend that you take a course in research methods from your local university. Now, make sure that it's from a field that's relevant to your interests. Go to school. Get educated. If you like sociology, and you want, like, you know, Arthur sort of comes from the realm of ethics and sociology. If you like that stuff, go take a course in research methods in the social sciences. It's good stuff. I personally love psychology, and that's where I took my research methods training. And there's a point. It matters that you choose the right field if you're going to do your skeptical analysis. And so I'm going to jump now to the Atheist Nightmare, the peanut butter video, and I just want to leave. I'm not finished, but I certainly want you to see this video. And remember, the point I'm making about this video is whether or not this person's skeptical analysis has been done and prepared well from the right field of study. We'll just wait for the projector to pick this up, and then I'll start it.
I would say this.
Here, I'm going to crank up the volume too.
Any theory on the origin of life on the Earth, or any other planet as far as that's concerned, is a fairy tale.
A fairy tale, pure and simple. Life from non-life, apart from God's direct intervention.
Excuse me for a second. I realize the speaker's not even plugged into my computer.
Sometimes that helps.
I was skeptical of whether that was working. There we go. This will be quite a bit louder. So I'll just start it over again.
I would say this. Any theory on the origin of life on the Earth, or any other planet as far as that's concerned, is a fairy tale.
A fairy tale, pure and simple. Life from non-life, apart from God's direct intervention, is a fairy tale. But despite that obvious truth, evolutionists continue to build their supposedly scientific case on a foundation that virtually rules out everything that follows after it.
Evolution teaches that energy, such as lightning or heat, plus matter, can occasionally create new life. Yet our entire food industry rests on the fact that this can never happen. If we examine a jar of peanut butter, it contains matter and is exposed to light and heat. But we never find new life inside unless an outside life contaminates it.
If the theory of evolution was viable, then I should, occasionally, by subjecting this to energy, end up having new life. Now, we go down to the store, and if I open this jar of peanut butter, maybe not often, but on some occasion, I should find new life inside. And so, when we open the jar of peanut butter, we look in there, there's no new life. And aren't you glad? Okay? Now, you may smile at this, but hopefully you'll never forget it, because you and I conduct, collectively, over 1 billion experiments every year, and we've done that for virtually 100 years. And we never encounter new life. In fact, the entire food industry of the world depends on the fact that evolution doesn't happen.
Okay, now, anybody, just in 1 or 2 sentences, please take on that
Well,
guy.
evolution doesn't address the origins of life to start off with.
Thank you. Evolution, there you go. Jem, go ahead.
Even beyond that, how would you know if there were new life in it? I mean, Laura said, do you expect a troll to pop out?
Go ahead.
He's never opened the incompletely sealed yogurt that I opened that had new life in it. I mean, of course.
Yeah.
The largest recall in U.S. history was because of contamination of the peanut butter.
Oh,
Or
you're right.
new life.
Yeah.
So in that
Yeah.
case, which was it?
How do you know?
Yes,
I
go
don't
ahead.
know.
Just because, let's say it was really, really incredibly unlikely that new life would appear, like Jem said, the fact of it happening for us, let's say, existing, doesn't say that it isn't really unlikely that life would spring up in general.
Yeah, and one more from the back, if you would.
Two quick comments on it. One, what does the courtroom have to do with science? The second being, what does an engineer know about biology?
Thank you. And thank you for that. That hit the heart of the matter. And I'm no malice to the engineer and author, as we saw there, that they used as a credential. And that, again, I'm not a professor of anything, but I'm still going to present later, and hopefully another SkeptiCamp, I'll present a skeptical analysis of something, and you guys can shoot at it. But what I'll try to do, and I mean this earnestly, is try to stay within the research methodology for that type of skeptical analysis. And I think that's the most important thing that I could bring to this group, that from my experience, is that having been a person who lived outside of the realm of academia for a long time, well, that's not a fair statement. I lived outside of the realm of scientific academia for a long time, and I found that I had no defense whatsoever to that type of argument. I could not sit and say, what is wrong with what that guy said, because he used empirical evidence and all of that. It sounded really good. And so I think part of being a skeptic is to arm yourself.
It's cargo cult science.
Thank you. Thank you. Very well said. So another point I'll make is that this is a very nice picture. How do we define nice? So tell me, just take a second and tell me, I think these are nice pictures. Why are they nice to you?
They're in focus.
Yeah, they're in focus, they have colors. Look, a color. And that's sort of the point, is that in the world of skepticism too, it's important to point out that you have to have something that you can measure, something that you can talk about, some methodology for, and maybe there is a methodology defining nice, right? Maybe symmetry is a part of that. I know it is from the world of psychology with regard to the human face. Symmetry plays a big role in our acceptance of beauty, as an example. Doesn't mean we have to make decisions based on that, but the reality is it's there. So when it comes to knowing, and that's why I kind of led that nice picture before this, is intuition. It's knowing something from the gut, and beauty is one of those things that seems to come from the gut. Some of the pitfalls with using intuition as a method of knowing, and again, this is the short list. confirmation bias. We when it comes to intuition, very often we ignore the misses, but we remember hits. In other words, I've used my intuition a number of times, and gee, I got it right. I got it right. I knew how to find this place. I knew how to get this done. I used intuition to figure out how to move this very fragile podium across the front of the room. And the reality is that very often we become confident when we use intuition, but that's because we remember the hits. We forget how many times we got it wrong. And I think it's important to count those times. Personal bias is introduced with intuition. We make stuff up. As human beings, ask any psychology professor and they'll show you the studies behind it. Humans make stuff up all the time. We have untested ideas, and of course, it's a bad habit. Yes?
When you say make stuff up, are you saying consciously lying, or we're
Well,
filling in the gaps?
yeah,
unintentionally?
let's dissect that one just in half. A conscious lie would mean, I know that's wrong, I'm going to tell it. Very often we tell lies.
Yeah.
We tell lies, and then it's not until a minute later where I go, oh, that was not correct. And, I could have known better had I been, if I'd had that, module in my brain turned on, if I want to keep it simple.
You had basically pitfalls. I think there is some very good things with intuition.
Yes.
Years ago, when I first started learning the arguments for atheism and for religion and that line of thinking, one of the very first videos I saw on YouTube was a guy by the name of Dr. William Lane Craig. You've probably heard of him.
Yep.
Bills himself as a philosopher, but I didn't understand the argument at first, but my intuition was there's something really wrong with this argument, which made me start looking more at. My intuition was, I don't think there's a pile of pitfalls. I think there is something very positive about intuition.
Sure.
That works
Unchecked,
in our favor.
there are pitfalls, and I think you're right. Intuition is what got us, to human species to survive for as long as it did. That was the best way we made decisions in the days when we were tracking animals and trying to hunt. Yes.
So maybe we can make a distinction between using intuition as a guide and declaring a knowledge.
Well, yes, I think you can, but I think, and I'll talk more about that, it is a way of knowing something, though, like faith is. Faith is a way to know something, and I like your distinction. I think the important part here is that, generally speaking, it can be a very bad habit, and we need to put it in its place, is all I'm saying. Put it in its place, recognize that we can be very intuitive and good at using it, but also recognize that it has these pitfalls. Yes?
I think of intuition sort of in the same way that I would think of an anecdote. It's not evidence, it's not a good way necessarily to know something, but it might be a good reason to start investigating further. Like I assume you eventually went and figured out what exactly was wrong, and you didn't just say, that's wrong because of my intuition.
Oh yeah, I did. I mean, when I first saw that video, I didn't know what a logical fallacy was.
Right.
It was not my area. I'm a trailer mechanic. This is not my, And, but I learned a lot, and it's just, there's something in the beginning of almost any arguments, whether it be, even the global warming argument. I was actually a very, very staunch supporter of people who thought global warming. And then I started looking at the other arguments. My intuitions were, hey, they have something here. Then I started learning about it, and then I thought, no, they started getting off track, and I went back to what I believe now. I don't. It's just I think intuition guides us, and if like you said, used properly.
Yeah. And that's really all I'm going to say about any of these is let's put them in the place that they belong in. They are ways of knowing, though. And anyway, I'll move on if you don't mind, because I think our last speaker went a good 10 minutes into my talk, and I just want to hit the high points here, guys. Tenacious beliefs exist in society, and these are those long-standing beliefs that have been there for forever. The idea that there is a God, and I mean no malice to anybody who thinks there is. It's just the idea that there is a God isn't a good example of those tenacious beliefs. The idea that there needs to be a creator. These stories that have been accepted as true with no means of verification. Sometimes they fall definitely into the categories of superstition or gossip. Some pitfalls and solutions to tenacious beliefs. First of all, a tenacious belief can be true, just like intuition can be. You can be right and intuition, and some of those old beliefs can be correct. But personal bias gets introduced to it. St. Paul wrote a lot about homosexuality and declared it a sin and so on. And that belief in the realm of Christendom has gone on for a couple thousand years now, virtually unchecked. People still might, like people I love in my family, go back to the scripture and say, but St. Paul said, and there's no critical analysis of that of those beliefs. Acceptance of some blatant untruths is another pitfall. There's no way to verify some of the information in these old tenacious beliefs. Sometimes they can be verified. My mother used to tell me all the time that if you swallow your bubble gum, that it will stay in your stomach forever. I don't know why she said that when I was a kid. She wanted me to spit it out, but I eventually found out that no, you digest it and pass it just like any other food. It can lead to erroneous and sometimes dangerous beliefs, and I'm not going to tell the bleeding story. I'm going to defer back to what Arthur Schaeffer said, just to make my point, is that in Clifford, the idea that some of these old beliefs, unchecked, can leave us to make some really bad decisions, like attacking Jews and blaming them for the death of Christ. And societies, what the Nazis came up with and some of their ideas. Some of those were very old, untested ideas that Hitler latched onto, and away they went. It can leave you open to manipulation if you use some of these old tenacious beliefs without checking them. And the solution, of course, is to avoid the use of this method of knowing something, except for some of the smaller decisions in life. And I think, as with any of them, that applies. Authority. This is where we accept something from somebody just because they are an authority figure. It relies on information or answers from an expert in a particular field of study. And I'm not going to dissect this one very much, because I think it's rather obvious to us that personal bias from the authority figure can easily find its way into the information that they give to us. It leaves us open to manipulation. Sometimes we can't tell if the person knows what they're talking about. Like that engineer who's engineer and author who's giving that long talk about evolution. There are many people who were swayed by that video. And I found a copy of that video and some of Kent Hovind's video in one of my family members' house. So I was going through, we were sharing videos and telling stories, and I was like, oh, look at this. And I was told how great this is. It's like, wow. I'll leave it at that. And the solution to this, at least in part, is to seek answers from a public forum where experts are encouraged to debate their ideas. Now, published studies in journals and things like this, they can still be wrong. But the idea is you're getting some of the better information in there, I think on average, compared to what you would find in other places. And I really do like the idea of going to a university, a professional association, or a college and finding out what they think about certain things. Solution: you can also become your own expert by studying something in a field of study and applying some of the skeptical critical analysis techniques as you move through your studies. And of course, that leads us authority. It leads us to faith. And this is a variation of the methods of authority and tenacity that require unquestioning trust in an authority, text, or a concept. And I had a long chat with that this morning, just before I got here, about faith with one of my family members. And you mentioned cargo cults. Personal bias can be brought into just about anything we do. Even good science is subject to the experimenter bias. And cargo cults exist out there, and one of the faith stories I had about that was simply this, is that in the 1600s, in the Micronesia, Polynesia areas, Spanish ships showed up at some of the old islands, and basically the people on those islands had a religious belief, and I'm giving you a very paraphrased version of this. They had their set of religious beliefs, and these outsiders came in with that, by appearance, were rich they had all kinds of things with them, this cargo that they carried with them, and that set, as these ships showed up, the stories went from island to island, and these they weren't quite yet cargo cults at this point in time, but there was a belief that these outsiders were almost gods when they showed up in these places, because their technology was so far beyond that of the local islanders, what they had. And years later, when the United States Army was using some of those islands for military bases, the cargo cults that we see today flourished and came into full bloom. And what happened really was they saw these people who, a man sat at a desk with a box on the desk that made radio noises, which he just saw as a voice speaking out of a box at that time. And the man would pick up a microphone or a thing and talk into it, and cargo would drop from the sky as he asked for this. Things flying in the sky would land. All of these technologies seemed almost godlike for those people on this island, or these islands. And cargo cults formed, and essentially what they did is they tried to imitate the actions of these people that had come to those islands. And if you'd like to learn more about cargo cults, go to the Smithsonian Institute website, type in cargo cult, and take a look at what they have. National Geographic has published stories on this with wonderful pictures of people with they've built runways with fake aircraft built out of bamboo. They march up and down. They have a radio tower there that has no radio in it. And they literally put on coconut headphones and stand there. And as a part of their religious belief, they have somebody on watch for this man. Now I'm going to botch his name. Yeah, I keep wanting to say it's Bob Frum, the guy that used to be a radio announcer, but his first name, whatever it was, is, say it was Ken Frum, or whatever it was. And
It's John.
Thank you, I think it is John. But the idea is simply this, is that somebody at some point in time had asked this man, who are you? And he says, I'm John from, and that became his name, John from Atlanta, perhaps. And this John from became the figurehead of the cargo cult. And faith, this story has been passed on for a while, and cargo cults exist today. These same people now, starting after the 1940s, have still maintained this religious belief where they wait for John Frum to come back, and when John Frum comes back, he's going to bring cargo with him and make them all rich and set them all free again. It has a very Christian twist to it, this whole story, that this God is going to return. And this wonderful, pardon me for blocking on the details of the name again, I don't know why I'm doing this, but basically David Attenborough was there, and he was interviewing one of the proponents of this religion, and asked him questions. And he asked him, you've been waiting for 45 years now. How do you, are you getting discouraged about John Frum coming back to bring his cargo to your island? And the fella turned to David Attenborough and basically said this. He says, you're from a Christian society, and you've been waiting for Jesus Christ for 2,000 years. You tell me. And I'm paraphrasing it, but you get the idea is that these are all things that happen as a result of faith. What really moved me about the cargo cult story was how quickly a religion was formed and became placed into the society in an almost permanent structure. That was very interesting to me, to see that something like that could happen, and in 45 years they've actually got a formal religion has come out of this. Faith encourages adherents not to think critically about an idea. The idea that we accept something on faith, it turns off the process of skeptical inquiry, not always a healthy place to be. And the solution, of course, is to avoid the use of faith, except for small decisions. I have faith that my wife loves me, and I do believe that is faith in that sense. She tells me she loves me, but I don't know what she's thinking. I don't know what's going on inside of her head. She treats me kindly. She kisses me on the forehead when I fall asleep. And a number of other things happen that lead me to tend to believe that indeed she does love me. But ultimately, I have to admit to myself that I'm taking a leap of faith to know that she loves me. And I'm okay with that. So the reality is, I don't think everybody can escape from faith. I don't think it's always a bad thing. It's just, as a way of knowing something, it needs to be put in its place. Just like every one of the other methods of knowing that we have. Rationalism, nothing can go wrong with rationalism. Accept it blindly. In rationalism, we seek answers by use of logical reasoning. There are pitfalls to that. Of course, we all know there's some really good stuff that comes with rationalism, but personal bias can be brought into it. Again, if premise statements are inaccurate, the output from a logical deduction may also be inaccurate. And I think that, so if we start with something that's not quite well-founded or well-tested, we can end up with a logical conclusion coming out of an argument, a rational argument, that leads us to, in the end, when looking at the evidence, an irrational outcome. And so what I did is I think the solution is best is to use verified facts wherever possible. But what I wanted to do too was to just go back to the argument clinic video. And in the argument clinic video, This is a Monty Python sketch that is one of my favorites for all time. I've even acted this out with my children, where we videotaped my little 8-year-old daughter and I having this debate. But I'll leave it with you. I'll just let you watch what Monty Python has to say about this. I'll just wait till it's got to pick up the video. There we go.
Is this the right one for an argument?
I've told you once.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have.
When?
Just now.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
Didn't.
I did.
Didn't.
I'm telling you I did.
You did not.
Oh, sorry, is this a 5-minute argument or the full half hour?
Oh, just the 5-minute one.
Fine. Thank you. Anyway, I did.
You most certainly did not.
Now, let's get one thing quite clear. I most definitely told you.
You did not.
Yes, I did.
You did not.
Yes, I did.
Didn't.
Yes, I did.
Didn't.
Yes, I did.
No, this isn't an argument.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. It's just contradiction.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
It is not.
It is. You just contradicted me.
No, I didn't.
Oh, you did.
No.
You did just now.
No, nonsense.
Oh, look, this is futile.
No, it isn't.
I came here for a good argument.
No, you didn't. You came here for an argument.
Well, an argument's not the same as contradiction.
Can be.
No, it can't. An argument's a connected series of statements to establish a definite proposition.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is. It's just contradiction.
Look, if I argue with you, I must take up a contrary position.
But it isn't just saying no, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
No, it isn't. Argument's an intellectual process. Contradiction is just the automatic gainsaying of anything the other person says.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
Not at all.
No, look.
Thank you.
What?
That's it. Morning.
But I was just getting interested.
Sorry, the 5 minutes is up.
That was never 5 minutes just now.
I'm afraid it was.
No, it wasn't.
Sorry, I'm not allowed to argue anymore.
What?
If you want me to go on arguing, I'll have to pay for another 5 minutes.
But that was never 5 minutes just now. Oh, come on. This is ridiculous.
I'm very sorry, but I told you I'm not allowed to argue unless you pay.
Oh, all right. There you are.
Thank you.
Well,
Well, what?
that was never 5 minutes just
I
now.
told you I'm not allowed to argue unless you pay.
I just paid.
No, you didn't.
I did. Look, I don't want to argue about that.
Well, I'm very sorry, but you didn't pay.
Aha! Well, if I didn't pay, why are you arguing? Gotcha.
There you have.
Is that? If you're arguing, I must have paid.
Not necessarily. I could be arguing in my spare time.
I've had enough of this.
No, you haven't.
Oh, shut up.
There you go. Yeah. So, who can point out where perhaps one of the many logical fallacies was in this that argument? Obviously, the guy had paid, right? We saw that. But that's sort of the premise of the whole point. Now, where was I? I was faith rationalism, right? And when we talked about rationalism, this projector's got a slow cycle of scanning, so it just takes a second for it to pick up the. There we go. Again, logical reasoning. It can be led, it can be affected by personal bias. If premise statements are inaccurate, the output from the logical deduction may also be inaccurate. And the solution is to use verified facts wherever possible. And that was a good example, I thought, of where verified facts had failed. And there's the argument clinic video. And then, of course, there's empiricism, which has no problems whatsoever. The use of observation or direct sensory experience to obtain knowledge is a good way to learn, to know. And some of the pitfalls, of course, experimenter bias. Know your field of study and question your favorite ideas with great scrutiny. Experimenter bias has been accused of, in every time I watch the media pick up a story. For instance, there's a fella that was making claims that global warming wasn't happening, and they accused him of experimenter bias. There's a fellow that was making claims that global warming is true, and they were accusing him of experimenter bias. And you'll hear this all the time. The reality, though, is it can be buried deep in the data. Things can be hidden in there, and sometimes when you're trying to tease out an outcome, that's where experimenter bias can play its role. And it's really good to have any study that's done published in a journal and beaten to death by people who are doing studies like it. to help you to find the best way to arrive, to find the best result. A hypothesis must produce testable predictions in the empirical method. Look at similar research and see how it was structured. Make a solid foundation for your work before you start. And of course, operational definitions must be clear and accurate to ensure the validity of results. In the realm of psychology, one of the softer sciences, there's no question about it. Operational definitions are hard to define. Whereas in the world of physics, it's just a little bit easier because you're asking what the rate of fall for this ball through the atmosphere is going to be. The operational definitions get a little bit easier to define in that sense. It's possible to carry forward unchecked bias or mistakes from earlier experiments, and of course, you're going to have to scrutinize prior work when you go to use the outcomes of that work in the studies that you're doing today. And finally, empiricism by definition is limited to the natural world. It gets really, if somebody does say that they arrived here by spacecraft, yes, there are some empirical things that can be looked at. You can look for burn marks in the parking lot where my spacecraft would have landed. There's all kinds of things you could do in looking for empirical data, and of course you'd find none of them because my arguments would weed their way around. But the idea is simply the only things we could look for would tend to be in the natural world. And of course the summary is, be self-aware. That's really all I wanted to talk about in this study, was for us to become self-aware of the ways that we're learning, the ways that we're claiming to know things, of how we acquire information, and how we come to think something is true. This presentation is only a summary of the ideas that are much broader and can take up years of study. I mean, professors of philosophy are the experts in my mind, and there are philosophers of science. There are philosophers of religion, and so on and so forth. There are many fields of study in philosophy, and even they have to make sure that they know the arguments from their particular field of study. You should take a course in research methods from your local university. I highly recommend this for any skeptic. Remember that research methods in the physical sciences vary greatly from those in the social, behavioral, and political sciences. And that if you're strong in, say, computer programming, you may not be the one, or you may not feel completely comfortable in doing skeptical analysis of something to do with food and diet, right? You'd want to pick a dietitian or somebody who's got training in that field of study to help you to fully form your arguments for and against whatever you're doing. And unless you take the time to learn the various methods of argument and discourse, you'll find your skeptical analysis lacking. And of course, there's nothing wrong with being a skeptic, generally anyway. But the idea here is that if we're going to do it, we should try to do it well. Any questions?
It's probably best, actually.
Take a break right